Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at the feature race at Woodbine on Saturday. It's the Grade 2 King Edward. We're going a one-turn mile on the E.P. Taylor turf course. Let's take a peek at this field. It is a wide-open event. Your tepid morning line favorite is the Millionaire. Number 6, Shirl Spite, making his first start since finishing a good fourth in a quality edition of the Dubai Turf at Maidan.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see him back in North America after two road races. Japan, as you mentioned, also at Maidan, and his last race in North America was a very impressive second place finish in the Breeders' Cup Mile. But some other horses in here. Treason's an interesting horse, the horse on the rail. You have some hard-knocking types like War Bomber. I think top to bottom, this is a really great field for this year's edition.
Well, let's throw up the Timeform US Pace Projector. We're expecting some speed in here. The number 7, Treason, he's shown the ability to rate in his last few races, but he really exploded on the circuit when he was able to show his fine early speed. I think he'll be forwardly placed. And the Minster, this horse has shown speed at 6. He's shown speed going long. I think he's going to be close to the pace as well. So things could heat up.
Yes, they certainly could. I think the Minster, coming out of that 6 furlong race, should have a little bit of speed in him. And even the horse on the outside, I don't want to say he's necessarily speedy, but in the past, he has shown some speed, more recently been forwardly placed in some slower races than the other two exit. But I do think the pace should be pretty good early on.
And that would set things up for the number 1, Palo Alto, and the rest of the closers. Palo Alto comes out of a pretty good effort at Laurel Park. This is the Prince George's County Stakes. His first start off a 7-month layoff. And I think, Ashley, you can look at this race one of two ways. You can say, okay, it's his first start off the layoff. He's just going to miss. It's a good performance. And B, you could look at it and say, how does he lose this race? Is there some sort of character flaw? He's still seeking his first win in North America.
I'm going to go with it's a good race. I'm not going to go with the how does he lose this. This is a pretty gritty stretch battle between this one and Eons. And Eons had a pretty good record throughout the career, but did score the upset here. The big thing is it was a long layoff. And I find this intriguing. Not only is he racing second off the layoff, but because he's going to Canada, he's able to race with Lasix in a stakes race. So I think that kind of changes things up a little bit. And he's never raced with Lasix. So I wonder if it's a combination of things. Are they able to use Lasix, or is this just a great spot for him to hopefully get a graded stakes victory under his belt?
I like him cutting back to a mile. I think his kick might be enhanced even at this shorter distance, given enough pace to work with. And Timeform US believes there will be some pace. He also wouldn't mind a little bit of cut in the ground. The number 2 is Town Cruise. This horse scored last time out against Allowance Company back on July the 30th, and he utilized his tactical speed in that race. We'll take a look at Town Cruise right now. This was just a rock-solid performance. He's going to have to step up his game against tougher competition. He was 5th in this race last year, but we know he has it in him. He won a race called the Woodbine Mile in 2021.
He certainly did. And, it was great to see him find the winner's circle again. Kevin Nichols was aboard him 2 times in a row, maybe learned something out of that race 2 back in his first start of 2023, was able to put it together. And you mentioned he did win the Woodbine Mile, and sometimes these older horses, once they lose a little confidence, can be tough, but at least he's coming in here, as I mentioned, off a pretty nice win.
And his tactical speed should have him in a very good position when the real racing commences. Of course, he went gate to wire in the Woodbine Mile of 2021, but in that last race, he tucked right in off the leaders, and I think that's where he'll be on Saturday. The Minster we talked about is a strong pace presence. This is going to be his second start off of a lengthy layoff, and I think he can build on his most recent performance on the synthetic, because off the layoff, that was a stressful race. He had to duel from start all the way around through the turn, and I think he gained a lot of fitness from that performance.
I think so too. And I think the big thing is not only was it off the long layoff, but this horse hadn't gone 6 furlongs in a very long time. Closest would have been 6.5 or 7, right? So this is a horse that they had stretched out in distance for a long time, cut him back, and he was dueling it up front early on and just tired up. Probably needed a race.
He was a very good 2-year-old in 2021, including winning his debut in his only prior turf start, going 6.5. He has speed. The 4 is Dancing in Denial. This horse was 9th last time out in an optional claiming race. It was a race, however, where he caught a tough outside post position on the inner turf, was forced wide all the way around the track. His start 2 starts back produced a rallying effort where he just missed. So maybe if you give him enough pace, he can come with a run at a price. That being said, he's more sort of a underneath horse for me in single race exotics.
You think he's a minor player, and the key race is that one that you mentioned on June 18th, because it was pretty productive looking at where the winner and a couple others came back to finish in their next outings. And there wasn't really pace for him last time out. And I also think if you go down the page, he does have a little bit of that typical good race, bad race syndrome. When he's good, he's really good, and he's a major player. And otherwise, he's kind of getting those minor shares. But I do think too, I do think he likes the turf a little bit better.
I think the number 5 War Bomber is just one of my favorite older horses up in Canada. He shows up on synthetic. He shows up on turf. And I think his form's a little bit dirtied up this year. He ran twice on the synth going 2 turns and got caught up in pace battles in both of those races. So they cut him back in the Connaught Cup last time out, going 7/8 on the turf. He rallied from off the pace. But as you see, he's sort of kind of in behind horses here. He's going to have to find a seam to run. Once he gets clear, he's going to fire to only be beaten a length. He's a little bit underrated.
I think he is super underrated, and that, the grade 2 being at 7/8 and now going to mile, I think they would have loved a mile in this race and they didn't have it, but it was a really good performance. Rico Walcott was aboard him for the first time, and I thought piloted him well, and he's able to kind of make up some ground here on the inside and just is the toughest to kind of claim second in there. So I'm excited to see him stretch out, and he loves this turf course. I know you go down the page, you say, okay, well, he didn't run too well in the Woodbine Mile, but we know last year how competitive it was with Modern Games winning it.
Shirl Spite is up next, the number 6, and the Millionaire had a big season in 2022, especially at Keeneland, where he won the Maker's Mark Mile during the spring and then finished second in the Breeders' Cup Mile. And this is just an excellent performance at a giant price behind an international superstar in Modern Games. Shirl Spite in behind horses here. He's going to get clear, and he's going to run on late.
And it's funny to see the lack of respect he took in the race. He loves the Keeneland turf course. I mean, he had won the Maker's Mark Mile. Very impressive from off the pace. It was a 104 Beyer speed figure. He almost got the same number here. And I thought it was a very, very good race. And I understand Mr. Pipke decided to take some chances with him and ship him overseas to Japan and also Maidan. And Japan, in terms of the trip, I don't think it was great. And it was on the dirt, so you can draw a line through it. And then, last time out, he did race pretty well.
He ran really well, and he was in against just a truly international field of Group 1 middle distance horses from all over the world. And he was down inside, sort of in a little bit tight entering the straight. And once he got clear, he ran on for 4th. He's obviously good enough to win this race. Do you think this is kind of a prep for a race like the Woodbine Mile or later in the fall at Keeneland? Or do you think this is the goal?
I think this is a prep race. I mean, I do think he'll be ready to roll, and he's getting back to Woodbine, a place that he's been stable down and he's comfortable with. But I do think there's probably bigger long-term goals. And knowing that it's just August, there's still, a chance we can see him 1 or 2 more times before the end of the year easily.
Josie Carroll's a very good trainer, and she has a very good horse in the number 7, Treason, who just exploded in his first start up north, winning a 2 life allowance over the synthetic. And he's been plying his trade on the all-weather with some good performances. He won the Eclipse 2 starts back, and then last time out in the Dominion Day, going 1 1/8, he was further back than usual. He made an explosive run to the lead in mid-stretch, and he just gets knocked out by Tyson in the final 16th.
And you can see it was a very rainy day. And I know this is the Tapeta, and it holds its form and it has great drainage, but still I have a feeling it's not the same as if we saw sunshine and all of that jazz on that day. And I thought he raced very well in the Dominion Day. It's typically a pretty much a key race up there to see where horses go from there throughout the calendar season. And I think it's interesting to also find him back on the turf. He started his career on the grass, and you can see he's very lightly raced for being a 5-year-old. He's had some setbacks in 2022. We only saw him twice. We saw him with a sensational performance and then an okay one. But so far, it seems like this year they've been able to basically race him once a month since the meet has started, and he's been pretty strong.
And if he breaks well, he'll likely be a lot closer to the pace. Rarely see Mark Casse claim 1. Well, he took Conglomerate last time out for $50,000 off a good effort where he just missed a town cruise. He was running on strongly at the end of that race. Now he's going to cut back to a mile. Do you think a mile against this quality of competition is a little sharp?
It might be a little sharp, just knowing at 1 1/16 and 1 1/8 in the past, he's needed a bit more, and he's has a lot of seconds and thirds on his resume. But if I'm not mistaken, I know he's a 6-year-old. He might have been trained at one point by Mark Casse. He'd have to go pretty far down. I only got the 12 run lines in front of me, Dan, but he had to be supplemented into this race as well. So that's an interesting thing to kind of point out. And he only has that one attempt on the turf course at Woodbine, and that was last time out. We know Town Cruise raced really well, and so did he. But still probably a little bit of a long shot here at this mile distance.
And now maybe a mile is too short for Conglomerate. It might be too long for the number 9 Lucky Score, who is a graded stakes winner on the synth, a graded stakes winner on the turf. But those races have come sprinting. The most recent effort was a good third in the Connaught Cup behind War Bomber, who was sort of in behind horses. Lucky Score got to the outside. He was running on strongly at the end of that 7/8. Maybe that gives hope that he can go a mile. I still need to see it from him, and 4-1 is just a little bit light.
Have to see it to believe it. I agree. I do think, though, his last 2 and even actually his last 3 this year makes me think that he can get the mile, especially with it being the way it is at Woodbine, right? It's that 1-turn mile. It's not a 2-turn mile. And I think he has what it takes probably to get it done. But I agree. I want to see it just because in the past 6 furlongs he's been closing, right? And he hasn't been able to get the job done. I know it was on the Tapeta, but now he still has to go a lot further.
Bigger prices on our final 2 entrants, starting with the number 10. That's Bodie's Tipsy, who was 4th last time out behind Town Cruise. And going back and watching that race, I tried to find an excuse for Bodie's Tipsy. I just thought Town Cruise and Conglomerate ran better.
I agree. He's a horse too. That was at a mile and a 16th. You look at some of his races, he's always in need of extra distance. I think part of it, though, is just his running style. He's typically shuffled pretty far back, or is just kind of a late running horse. And it's not really doing him any favors. He is getting a lot of minor checks. And you go down the page, and I know his last win was 7/8. There was a really hot pace, and he was able to close. But the only other time he was able to graduate was an interesting race because he's pretty forward in a 7/8 race on the grass, and they went pretty fast. So he's a little bit of a head scratcher for me.
We have a classic winner on the outside. That's the 11 Hadassah, who won the second Jewel of Canada's Triple Crown in 2021. That was the Prince of Wales. Of course, that race is on dirt at your stomping grounds at Fort Erie, and Hadassah's never seen dirt since. He's a good, solid horse. He's got some speed. I just haven't seen that sort of improvement in his last few races that make me think we're going to get a breakthrough performance on Saturday.
I agree. I mean, in the Prince of Wales, he had the 84 buyer, and he's had better buyers than that. He's been pretty close to them in his last couple, but he just hasn't been able to seal the deal. We saw that in his first start of the year. We saw it last time out. It's unfortunate there's not a lot of spots in Canada to race on the dirt, right? And you would maybe see him in the States at some point to try it again, but it's been a while since he's been in the winner's circle. His other race was at a mile and an 1/8 on the turf. He was very forward in that race, and I think the pace was moderate. So I'm curious to see how involved he is going to be in this race early, especially with the outside post. But I can't really endorse him pretty high up here in this race.
He was third in this race last year, but he did get a good ground-saving trip that day. Now he's going to have to do it from a tough outside post position. Top pick time for the King Edward. I'm going to go with Palo Alto one more time. This guy continually breaks my heart. I hope I'm not dragging you down with me, but maybe getting Lasix will get him over the top, especially in a race with some pace.
That's what I think. I think the Lasix part was really intriguing. I thought he raced very well last time out, and we have kind of said you can take it one of 2 ways. He should have won, or he raced really hard. And I think he raced really hard. It was off a long layoff, and curious to see what he can do from the inside. And he has been a head scratcher in some of his races, but he's faced really nice horses. And I think it's a positive sign to see him going up to Woodbine.
It's also good to see Cheryl Spite back in action. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in his first start after that little international excursion. 1675 for Ashley, 1679 for me. It's a good edition of the King Edward at Woodbine. Good luck.